Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode is once again brought to you by our friends over at Galactic Comics and Collectibles at galacticcomicsandcollectibles.com, or if you're in the Bangor, Maine area at 547 Hammond Street in Bangor, Maine. This episode is writer and editor Steve Foxe coming to the podcast to talk about his upcoming series, Let This One Be a Devil, a true weird stories series over at Dark Horse. But Steve is a editor writer extraordinaire. He's an Eisner and Ringo Award-winning author of over 80 comics and children's books, including Spider-Woman, Dark X-Men, X-Men 97, All Eight Eyes, Rainbow Bridge, and the upcoming series I just mentioned, Let This One Be a Devil, as well as he edits books for James Tynion's Tiny Onion, World Tree, The Deviant, The Department of Truth, and so on and so on. He also writes the children's books like Super Mario for Golden Books, Little Golden Books, which is phenomenal. So Steve came on and talked about his upcoming series, Let This One Be a Devil, and so much more. Check this out. But before you do, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, all those things. Subscribe, rate, review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts, as well as follow us over on YouTube and check our website out, capesandtights.com. This is Steve Foxe, writer and comic book editor, talking Let This One Be a Devil over at Dark Horse Comics. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, Steve. How are you this morning? I should say early afternoon, whatever you want to say this morning.
No, it's morning in my time zone.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm doing great. I live in a frosty climate and it's starting to melt a little bit, so I'll take what I can get.
Are you in the Northeast? Is that where you are?
I'm in the Midwest,
Midwest. Okay.
solidly in the Midwest. I lived in New York for about 15 years,
Okay.
and then my fiance got a job offer out here, and we can actually afford a house here versus New York, so we
Well,
decamped.
I don't know. Can anybody afford a house anywhere now? I live in Maine, and I feel like the same. My wife and I are looking for a house, and I'm like, I don't know how people afford houses, honestly. But yeah, we're it snowed this morning. We got about, I don't know, 4, maybe 5 inches this morning here in Maine. Luckily, the snow we've gotten so far this year has been like powder, like a
Ah.
very soft. Like it's like one of those things. Like I feel like if I had a leaf blower, I could go outside and just leaf blow my driveway, and it would probably go away, which is nice. But I could use some warmer weather here pretty soon. I'm already tired of the snow. So yeah, we're here to talk comics, though. We're not here to talk weather. So let's just get started. Do you want to give us a little background on how you got into the world of comics in the first place, for those who may not know who you are, Steve?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I was kind of the perfect age to hit the comic cartoon boom. So I grew up watching X-Men the animated series, Batman the animated series, all those shows in the early 90s, and also all the toy lines. The toy lines were really instrumental to me. I think I have every single Toy Biz action figure produced in the 90s. And I'm not really being hyperbolic about that. I really do think have every single one. And that's what made me an obsessive and got me into comics at an early age. And I just became a lifelong reader. And I actually went to college for comics. I went to NYU. They have an individualized study school. So I studied comics and children's books. While I was there, I interned at Marvel Comics for a year. And when I graduated, I ended up working in children's books for a while. But I knew I wanted to do comics. And I wanted to write comics and edit comics and just be in the industry however I could. And my first publication, I won a Top Cow talent hunt
Okay.
and did a Witchblade story. And the year I won actually ended up being kind of like a fruitful little group because I won the same year as Teenie Howard and Isaac Goodhart. And Ryan Cady was one of the editors that year, and Phil Seavey was one of the runners-up. So we became really good friends, and we all have kind of progressed through the industry together. And kind of, sorry, my dog is
That's good. Yeah.
yeah, she's in the background. She's excited about it too. Um, Get in here, get in here, come here. But no, we've all kind of progressed through the industry together. But that was my first publication just a little over a decade ago now. And I just chipped away at it while I had a day job. So there was a period of time where I was just publishing like one comic a year, but I was doing a lot of children's books. So if you like go on my Amazon page, there's 30, 40 like Super Mario, Pokemon, yeah, yep. That is probably the book I've sold the most, the Super Mario Little Golden Book. It is in every grocery store, every Kohl's. If I got royalties off of that, I'd have three houses. But
It's so
sadly,
funny. It's like it's the weirdest thing when you have like a crossover. You walk into your son's room and it's just like you pick a book up and you're like, wait a second, I know that name.
I can't tell you how many times an editor has emailed me and said, the weirdest thing, my kid is reading this book and I saw Steve Foxe. Are you the same Steve Foxe? I was like, I surely am. I did write that Baby Shark book. Um, but
It's
those
funny because I mean Steve Fox is not like it's an obscure name too, so you could be another Steve Fox too, right? I mean, it's not like
Yeah,
yeah.
but those paid the bills for a really long time. And then thankfully they kind of became a bridge to Spider-Ham, which was when Marvel and Scholastic teamed up to do younger readers comics. Me and Shadia Amin did the Spider-Ham series, and that got me into Marvel to do X-Men 92. And from there, just kind of blossomed to do more and more. And so for the past couple of years, I've been really lucky to stay very busy. And the other side of that is I've been editing for years. That was my first job out of college. I edited for Paste Magazine when they covered comics. And several years ago, about 6 years ago now, James Tynan hired me to edit the Department of Truth, which has blossomed into me being an employee of Tiny Onion.
It's
That's my Tiny Onion water bottle will attest.
yeah. Is that what you get? That's your salary? It's just a water bottle.
Well, it's so much merch. Yes, I get buttons, pins, tote bags. Yes.
That's what I feel like. I work for a brewery by day, and I feel like the same thing. It's like I get a salary, but I also like have an entire wardrobe and koozies and all that stuff that I have that says the name of the brewery on it, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, Department of Truth. We just actually read that. I'm part of a book club for at my local comic book shop, and we actually read that in November, kind of like political
Oh, sure.
month. Yeah, it made sense. Yeah, and so we read that, and it was kind of funny that I looked it up afterwards. I forgot that you had edited that, and obviously what the Deviant, you did
And
some of the
World
Razor
Tree.
Blades,
Yeah,
and World Tree.
James and I co-created Razor
Yep,
Blades,
yep,
and then other stuff that hasn't been announced yet.
yeah,
So
yeah. And you did you edit the room service comic book too?
I did, yeah. So
Yeah.
I wasn't involved with the Kickstarter, but I did
Yeah.
edit the comic book one
The
shot.
comic itself, yeah, yeah. I have a my room service thing somewhere around here. I don't know where it
Yeah.
went, but yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of cool. I mean, I mean to you? I mean, you're a writer now, or you're both, but like you have a lot more writing titles, or credits now. What do you find? Do you find there's like fun in both different sides of things of editing versus writing?
Oh yeah, I don't think I would ever want to, give up one or the other. I've said before, I kind of always worried that there would be a point in time where I'd have to choose. Like I felt like I was walking on two planks that were getting progressively farther apart, and eventually I'd have to choose one or just break apart like a wishbone. But it's never happened. I've just gotten more and more limber. Uh, because it scratches different itches and I learn from one side and get to apply it to the other.
Hmm.
The people I edit, the perspective I get from editing them, looking over their shoulder, obviously that influences me as a writer. I get to see other tactics, tools, and being a writer myself. Actually, that doesn't flow as much into the editing side because my job when I'm editing James or when I'm editing Matt Rosenberg or when I'm editing someone else, it's not to say what would Steve Foxe do on this
Hmm.
book because James doesn't need Steve Fox's. He's doing well, it's to bring out the best possible version of what they're trying to do.
Hmm.
So, um, but they scratch different itches. I love being an editor. I've been doing it for over a decade now, so I don't plan on quitting anytime soon.
And honestly, it's silent, but a really lesser known job in the world of comics for those who are maybe on the fringe of comic book reading and collecting and stuff like that. Knowing that there's someone who actually is in charge of editing the book, making things, deadlines are met and things like that, and so on. And so sometimes when people are like, you talk to who on the podcast? And I'm like, oh yeah, Daniel Schroban. He's like, who? I go, oh, he edits books for Dark Horse. It's very integral to a lot of the comic books that you probably know, but you actually don't know who this person is. They're kind of like behind the scenes, and sometimes it's nice. Sometimes it's nice to be behind the scenes and just see people liking the
Yeah.
book and being like, hands off kind of thing. But no, it's a kind of like a silent, successful person in a book, for real.
Yeah, that's why I'm off of social media entirely, but I still sporadically put out my newsletter just to let people know I exist. And I always try to mention my editors on all the books because the amount of talent wrangling and deadlines and just the pure logistical work sometimes, let alone the creative feedback and the narrative structuring and all of that, just the logistical work of being an editor. Can be so taxing to have to wrangle people across the globe. Comics is such a global industry. Like just thinking of World Tree, Aditya Bidikar, the letterer, is in India. Fernando Blanco, the artist, is in Spain. James and I are both in Eastern Standard Time, and
Yeah.
then Jordi Belair and Image Comics are on the West Coast. So it's a 24-hour span to talk to the team. So it's logistically challenging. And so I try to give editors as much credit as possible. Removing myself from the equation, just knowing how much it takes to put a book together.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So it's just that is that one of those things that like I don't know. I'm sure a lot of writers out there have respect and like their editors in general. But does it make it easier to understand maybe some deadline things or some other things that maybe an editor comes to you? If Greg Lockard or Daniel come to you, with True Weird, and we're like, hey, this, that, and the other thing. Is it easier as a writer to understand what they're going through because you do edit books as well?
Oh yeah, I definitely have more sympathy for the
Yeah.
position because I know like, sometimes you're just getting it from all sides.
And something like so you can speak to obviously True Weird story. This is the new book. Let this is the was it Let This One Be a Devil would be the first one coming out here over at Dark Horse Comics, and Tiny Onion is the this new series. You're the writer. James is the writer as well. Is it a real team effort on this writing this book?
Yeah, so I've been editing James, but James and I are also very good friends. We talk to each other every single day. It's a weird relationship for someone who's like both my boss and I edit him, but we're friends and
It's
now we're co-writing. We've become like a very close symbiosis in a lot of ways. So when this program, this True Weird story program got kicked off, we wanted to do this first book and we wanted to launch it together. um, it just became really natural to do one together and to co-write it. Um, and yeah, we worked on it really closely. We talked through every issue. We had Google Docs going so both of us could contribute at the same time.
Mhm.
So it was a close collaboration on this one. Each True Weird story is going to be executed in a different way. So I can't speak to how they're all going to be pulled
Mhm.
off. But this one was a very close collaboration. Because we've done cryptid stories together in other ways because Department of Truth had Bigfoot, had Mothman. We did the whole Wild Fictions together where I was pulling all the research together. So James and I have talked through so many different like cryptid stories before, so much folklore, and we're both such nerds about the topic, that it made sense to collaborate on the launch title for this new sort of mini imprint we're doing.
Yeah, and so for those who maybe don't know what exactly is, so you touched a little bit on what True Weird stories are, but what is this specific kickoff story that Let This One Be a Devil really about? What's like an elevator, pitch on this one?
Yeah, so for the broader True Weird has been going on at Dark Horse already,
Mhm.
through Blue Book and then through the True Weird backup stories. And sort of the ethos of True Weird overall is to take, quote, real weird stories, strange phenomenon, alien abduction stories, strange, unexplained, monsters, weird sightings, things that just don't make sense, and to tell narrative stories around them, to put them into real story format. And with this new mini imprint we're doing, it's specifically focused on cryptids and monsters. Let This One Be a Devil is our attempt to do a definitive Jersey Devil story. The Jersey Devil is kind of weird amongst cryptids because I don't think there's anyone who really makes a case for the Jersey Devil being like a plausible biological animal. Within cryptozoology, that's kind of one of the core debates, right? Like, are these biologically plausible animals? Are they supernatural creatures in some way? That's one of the main forks in the road. And the Jersey Devils always had this strong folkloric element because a lot of the original myth originates from, the sort of Judeo-Christian side, this uh, whole like gossip in the early 1700s. It's very complicated.
Mhm.
So to say we want to do a definitive Jersey Devil story is already sort of an oxymoron. But that was the fun in it, was to try
Mhm.
to compound all these different contradictory stories and both educate the reader about why the Jersey Devil is so confusing, why it's both a chimera physically and narratively, um, and bring it all together in one four-issue package. And we're doing that by building an original story around the myths. So you're going to get an actual sort of education in the real myths. You know, the facts we're telling you are what people actually believe about the Jersey Devil. It is what's documented about the Jersey Devil throughout history, but you're getting that told around an original story that James and I have come up with.
Which is really kind of cool because it's a way to like learn a little bit about like the historical aspects of things like Jersey Devil or those kind of cryptid things, but also know that there's a little bit of fiction in that sense that you guys said you had that story that goes around it. Is it harder to balance those things? Is it like one of those things like a completely original true story or a fiction story that has nothing based in facts at all? Is that an easier thing or a harder thing to do with like this kind of thing, which is like based in some factual evidence out there?
You know, it has its benefits and challenges because you have a lot to draw from already, right? So you have these sort of building blocks that you get to pull from and use, and that's really fun. The most challenging thing, and I realized this like halfway through the first issue, is that a lot of this is set in the 1907 wave of sightings. And that is an extremely challenging period in history to write about because so much was in flux. Like cars existed, but they weren't widespread. Bathrooms existed in houses, but it wasn't widespread. You know, electricity existed, but you didn't necessarily have it if you were too far out in the boonies. So it was like everything was kind of on a borderline. So just figuring out the kind of reference to give Piotr Kowalski, our artist on the series, because he's so detailed. That's one of the reasons I love working with him is that Piotr builds entire worlds. You know, some artists you work with, backgrounds are more suggestions. It's
Mhm.
just enough to set the scene. Piotr is going to build the entire world, the entire setting. He's not going to skimp on anything. So you really have to provide what you're going to see. So figuring out that the early 1900s in like rural New Jersey, that was difficult. The research for that was difficult. And I think I told Greg Lockhart, the
Yeah.
editor, I'm never doing a period piece again. Like this is it. Everything from now on is set 1950s and above. Like
Yes.
I'm never going below that. Um, but that
Because
was the most challenging part.
this is a work of fiction in the sense that it's a comic book. It's not based in 100% in fact. But people still will pick apart it. People still will be like, not everybody had a bathroom. I don't know what you're thinking there. You
Yeah.
know, like they will. And it's like, come on. It's just like we're trying to have fun here too at the same time of bringing these stories to it. Piotr is one of my favorite comic book artists of all time, bar none. The work, that I just can't get. Every time I pick a book up and I didn't realize, like, or maybe I didn't know, but I forgot. I open the book up. I'm like, I know who drew this book. It's so like I don't know, like the hashes they use in each panel and page and stuff like that is just so beautiful. And obviously the colors too by Brad Simpson are phenomenal as well. So like
Yes.
this, like you guys have like an all star team on this freaking book too with you and James and Piotr and Brad. Like this is just like phenomenal team to kick off this series for sure.
Yeah, and then we brought Tom Napolitano on
Yes.
letters, who also did Blue Book. But
Yes.
yeah, Piotr and Brad, we also worked together in All Eight Eyes, which I did
Hmm.
at Dark Horse, also with Dan Shaban. But yeah, Piotr, he's so detailed. He brings so much reality to the world. And that's really why I love working with him. And I think it's why I asked him to do All Eight Eyes with me because I wanted that to be really grounded. And it's why I think he was a perfect choice for Let This One Be a Devil because there are so many outlandish and strange elements to the Jersey Devil story. So having him be able to ground that in the reality of Henry and Roy's story, while also having these, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to look at issue two,
No, no,
and
yeah,
I'll
just issue
send it to
one.
you. Yeah. In issue two, we get into more of the political backstory of the Jersey
Okay.
Devil. And Piotr has a chance to really let loose with more symbolic pages. And seeing him get to cut loose on that side too, he can really do anything. And I guess
Yes.
that's what's so fun. To see both the grounded storytelling that really makes you feel like you're in the 1900s, that really makes you feel like you're in the 1700s, but then to see him do these like full pages that look like woodcuts, these full pages that look like, these weird hallucinatory, satanic nightmares. Like it's fun to see the whole spectrum from him.
Mhm. It's funny because for Piotr, like it's like one of those things. Like over the past, I don't know, a couple of years, probably starting with All Eight Eyes. Like from that point on, I was just like any horror series that I gave a good review to, I was like the artist happened to be Piotr. It's like one of those things. Like, oh, this is amazing. Obviously, where Monsters Lie is also another phenomenal series that he's attached to. But yeah, in Satan's Swarm. Was a graphic novel that came out or late last year that was phenomenal as well. But yes, like to me, it couldn't go any more positive on the artwork side of this thing with having Piotr there, as well as like I said, Brad, and you mentioned letterer. Who's the letterer again? Sorry.
Tom Napolitano.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
When for some reason I stopped my notes with simp and not even son. I must have been in the middle of something and actually didn't even finish the actual note there. But yeah, I mean, so in general, you have true weird. Let this one be a devil series. You've written Mario. You've written the X-Men. Is it hard? So as someone who's a designer, a graphic designer by trade, sometimes I find myself hard to like focus on a specific project because I want to be focusing on the thing that's over here that's actually like something. Is it harder to separate these kind of things where like maybe you really want to be writing X-Men right now, but you have to write this, or maybe you want to be writing this and you have to be writing something like some sort of IP or some sort of like superhero story? Is it hard to like wrap your brain around when you write these things?
Well, I have to write them when they're due,
That's
which,
that's the
yeah.
thing. It's like that's the most difficult part. Like I said about being a graphic
Yeah.
designer and having to do something. It's like I literally just had a meeting with the ownership of the company I work for, Owner Brewing Company, and it was like one of those things that I have to like start prioritizing when things are due and not when I want to do them. If that makes any sense. So, do you find that difficult, or is it something that like you just it's part of the job?
I'm really used to it at this point
Okay.
because I've been juggling these different hats for a decade, to mix metaphors. Um, I had more trouble, or I had more stress when I was doing a lot more children's books. And I've pared down that side of my career. And I love doing the kids' work. I
Yeah.
love doing, the licensed books. It's fun to walk into like a Meyer grocery store and see, Pokemon books that I wrote.
Yep.
But that was so far afield from what I was doing otherwise, because those aren't narrative. Like
Hmm.
those are activity books.
Yes.
I had to come up with Sudoku puzzles for
Oh, this one,
those.
yeah, like
Like,
this, the Mario.
yeah, yeah, which looks
My
very
son,
well
yes,
loved.
well
Yeah.
loved. Well, I'm glad because my son realizes that he just peels the sticker off and sticks it back on the book instead of on something else. So there's that.
Yes, I was in a Barnes and Noble once and watched a kid pull one of my Splatoon books out and
Okay.
proceed to take the stickers and just put it all over the table at the Barnes and Noble, which was one way to engage with the
Yes,
book.
exactly. So yeah, I mean,
Um,
like, is that you continue? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was doing more of the kids' activity books, I had a harder time there because there were times where, as much as I loved that work, yes, I would be doing like crossword puzzles and thinking, I would really love to be working on like a script right now. I would really
Yes.
love to be engaging with something a little more narratively stimulating. Now, though, I'm kind of used to the juggling,
Yeah.
and it works in a nice way to kind of flex different muscles. Like, when you go to a gym, you don't do leg day every single day.
Mhm.
You want to kind of vary the workout. So that's how I feel about, switching from a new champion script to, a horror project to editing Department of Truth to, whatever else I may be working on. Also, people forget there's so much just kind of busy work to
Yeah.
being a writer or an editor, like the amount of like forms and invoices, tax stuff, filling out different like employments. There's so much other stuff you're doing. Even just responding to emails and correspondences takes up a lot of time. So it can be nice to just flex different muscles. As far as the challenge creatively, though, of keeping things in your mind, sometimes that is difficult because you go a month or 6 weeks between scripts and having to think like, okay, where did I leave everyone? Especially right now, I'm working on a number of team books.
Mhm.
So Superior Avengers has a cast of like 7 or 8 principal characters. New Champions has a cast of like 6 or 7 principal characters. So I'm going between months where I'm like, okay, 6 weeks ago, Phantasma was in this state of mind. So you end up coming up with different ways to manage that. And
Mhm.
and one of the I've talked about this on other podcasts, but for me, I often pick a band or an artist that I heavily associate with a book. And I don't listen to anything while I write, but I listen to something when I'm getting into it.
Okay.
So when I did Spider-Woman, it was a PJ Harvey album and a Slater Kinney album. So those two, I would listen to them just like in the car, taking my fiance to work, coming home before I'd write Spider-Woman. And that was just kind of my like mental click to do that. Like
Mhm.
Dark X-Men was Nick Cave. Superior Avengers is Chat Pile. Like for whatever reason, it just kind of like becomes associated in my head with that series, and it
Yeah.
allows me to get into it. Let This One Be a Devil was challenging because it's 1700s and 1900s. So I'm not really listening to music that easily fits that. But what I finally found was Ethel Cain, the
Okay.
first Ethel Cain album. She has these like weird choral, like haunting melodies. So there was a song on her first album that felt like, okay, this sounds like a ghostly dirge from the 1700s. So that's going to be my lead in for this book.
It's just to see like you trying to find music for the 1700, like trying to find that song, like being like, now I don't want to write this book.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I mean that makes sense. And I also feel like, I mean, is it not that you ever phone anything home, but it's probably a little bit easier to just like get like, there's not a lot of creative, like super creative writing in something like this sticker book than there is like this, Let This One Be a Devil, right? I mean, I'm sure,
Yeah.
there is this like there's a lot more heavy thought that goes into that, whereas this is more like I got to get it done kind of thing. I know, like I said, I don't think you probably ever phone anything home. I'm sure there's not like sentences that don't make any
Oh,
sense in here, but there are children. I'll tell you what, there
yeah.
are children's books that I've read to my son, like a Paw Patrol book or something like that, where I open it up and I'm like, what? Who was someone just like putting words on a page and it just like this doesn't even make sense. Like my son's gonna point it out to me like, Dad, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know what you're talking about. Because like there's
Well,
certain times where like there's such a hard to read. Like it's so hard to read.
yeah. The activity books too, that's something that like if the deadline was pressing, I could stay up all night and just
Yeah,
like, copy and paste things from
yeah,
past activity books and like change the numbers and change the
yeah,
the puzzle formats.
yeah.
I can't really do that with like a new champion script. Like it's gonna show if I've like stayed up all night and just kind of like frantically done something, that's gonna suffer. And that's also unfair to all my collaborators,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Because
yes.
Ivan Fiorelli is going to spend 6 weeks drawing something versus like a designer plugging in stock art.
Yeah,
So it's not the same situation.
yeah. I mean, but
But
you
yeah,
do
I,
get a
I
chance. I mean,
I totally
to
phoned in some of those activity books.
which I don't blame. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
It's like I just try, it's like I don't. I'm guessing the person who does the voiceover stuff for children's toys phone that in versus this, and they do the same thing where they do a voiceover for some sort of animated show. Like their
Yeah.
job, it's different. There should be like, okay, the letter A. Whereas maybe something they're actually voicing Mario, it's going to be different than actually voicing some sort of button you push on a book. I mean, it's
Yes.
just it is what it is. My son's not judging your work in this. It has freaking Mario in it. That's
You
all he
never
cares about.
know because so I don't read any reviews of my work now,
Yeah,
but when I was younger, of course that's like the siren call of all
yeah,
creators. And one of the only review that haunts me to this day is for a Batman storybook where I wrote that the Joker was escaping in a dump truck and the artist drew a garbage truck and a parent wrote an angry review that their child was upset that it said dump truck, but it was a garbage truck. I had no control over that, and I didn't get a chance to review the text before it went to art,
yeah.
but it's now a 2-star review on Amazon for all time.
It's funny. I wanted to bring it up because I talked to Tim Jacobus, who wrote or who did the illustrations for the covers of Goosebumps books, and I wanted to bring it up to him, but I ended up not bringing it up to him on the podcast. But like the thing is, one of the things that's always original Goosebumps that's always frustrated me is that the Deep Trouble Goosebumps book has a hammerhead shark on the front of the book, and you think that it's going to be this whole thing about sharks and so on and so forth, but the book's actually about mermaids. And to me, it's always been one of these things that every time I pick that book up and like skim through it, I'm always like so frustrated that the cover has a shark on it, and it's really about troubles with mermaids in the ocean. And so yeah, I can see how that could be frustrating to someone. But yeah, it is. I mean, like I said, the majority of people, the people are going to judge it, me sitting late at night being like, what the heck is Mario doing in this book? And actually, the biggest complaint I would be about the designers on black text in certain places where the pages are too dark. Because I mean, most of the time you're trying to read these books to children at night in the dark or like with like a reading light on. And sometimes I'm like, dude, I can't. I'm only 38, but I can't read this thing. No, but you also get an opportunity to write Super Mario. I mean, there's no Super Mario comic, I mean, as of right now, and so you get a chance to dabble in some characters that some other people in the comic book world maybe don't get a chance to get dabble in. So that's pretty cool too.
Oh yeah, I consider it very bucket list that I have published Super Mario and Pokemon
Pokemon, yeah.
and Justice League Saves Christmas. Those are all really fun.
Mhm.
I was very grateful for my entire like children's books career, and I'm sure I'll continue to do some kid stuff here and there. It was just not sustainable to do that in the volume that I was doing it. Now that I've had so
Yes.
much comic work
Yeah.
pick up.
A question for you: has anybody walked up to like a booth at a convention, had this be signed yet, or no?
Not that one,
Okay, but someone's
but
done like a different one.
yes, yeah. So I don't really do a lot of convention
Yeah.
appearances, but I did do a signing for the Spider-Verse anthology I was in, and someone brought up another Mario book with a Spider-Ham book, which was
That's
very cute.
that's awesome. I also laugh because it's like you're one of the few people who've written something like this where I'm like not freaking out that my son's putting the stickers on the front. Where like if you said like one of the comic books that you've written, I'm like, no, don't do that. That's horrible. But yeah, so he's had the opportunity to do that, which is kind of cool. And the kind of thing that we could sit next to each other. He could be reading his Mario book and I could be reading, Time Slide or whatever, and we're both reading the same writer, but at different levels is really kind of cool too. So
That's what I say.
yeah, it's a really
I
to me it would be a pinch me moment, and I'm guessing it is for you as well. It's just pretty cool.
I'm one of the few writers that like I've gone from activity books through to erotica. So I've
Yes.
really got the entire like
You've got someone's entire
every
life. I mean,
age
I
I've
could
got I've
read
got the entire life. Yeah.
someone could read your Mario book and then later on graduate to X-Men or over
Yep.
to let this one be the devil, and then they finish with the erotica stuff. So there you go.
Yeah.
You got the whole market. You don't have to do anything else.
Birth to death. Yeah.
It's it's pretty good. But I mean, this is really cool. I mean, I think that like honestly, I think a lot of writers out there, editors out there would also say it's a pinch me moment to work alongside someone like James in the world of comics. I mean, James is one of the premier comic book writers and creators right now, in my opinion, and I think that a lot of people at the local comic book shop would agree on that. And so, you getting to not only attach your name to someone like that, but actually be friends and work together closely. And I guess for me, like I said, I work at a brewery, and it's really sometimes when the ownership group listens to you and says something for something that we're the fifth largest brewery in the state of Maine, and it's like when they actually say something like, yeah, cool, that's a beer name. We'll like that beer name. We'll use that beer name. And it's kind of like a pinch me moment in that moment because it's like, oh, cool. This is like I actually have say. And to be able to have something like that with someone, again, so recognizable like James, I'm guessing that's a pretty cool experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky that Tiny Onion, we're still a small company
Yeah.
and we've done really big things already. And there's stuff that, hasn't been announced yet. But even the things that have been announced, we're very proud of. But James is a very collaborative leader. He's a very open-minded leader. I think that's one of the things that has made it so easy to work with him from the start is that I've edited people who you give them a note and their first impulse is to push back or defend themselves. And that's just really not James's mindset.
Mhm.
If someone's response to something is, oh, this doesn't quite make sense, or, here's how we could improve it, he's open to hearing that. He wants the books to be the best they can be. So
Yeah.
having that sense of flexibility and openness from the jump, from when we started Department of Truth, from these other books to now that we're a full-fledged company, where all of us from, the production designer through to the events manager through to, me as the editor, we all have the chance to provide, feedback and suggestions where we all really feel like we have a voice being heard. That I think is what is making Tiny Onion such a fun place to work and really a place that feels like we're against all that language of like we're a family, blah blah blah. Like I think that is kind of like a toxic way to move as a
Yes.
company, but like we do feel like very collaborative as a company,
Mhm.
as a whole. Like we do all feel like we have a chance to contribute something. And even though we're spread out geographically, we have people on both coasts. We try to meet multiple times a year for in-person summits so
Mhm.
that we have a chance to contribute while we're in the same room and really bounce ideas off of one another.
That's really cool. I mean, I've talked to Isaac Goodart. I've talked to Tate Bromble. Now you. It's just a cool. It's a humbling experience for myself just to know that like no one said anything bad about James, and like that's the it's a cool thing to hear that like it's the same thing I'd love to hear about people like work with Dark Horse and things like that. Like I've always heard talk to people even off air, even if someone like was like, oh yeah, it's a great company to work for, and then they sign off and they're like, oh my god, dude, don't experience. Like, I literally, truthfully will say, there's never been that experience with either someone with Dark Horse or James or in that sense. So that's pretty cool too. In that sense, you guys all praise working with someone like that. But the cool thing to me, it's like opening acts for a comedian or opening acts for a band. To me, it's like those people who may not know who you guys are, between you and someone like Isaac or Tate, get an experience, you get your name out there, and then now people are going to be fans of yours. And I think that's kind of cool too, even though obviously you were writing and you do your own thing on the side too, but someone who solely was like, James Tynion, I got to get something from
Yeah.
him. Will now maybe experience someone from you, which is really cool. And I think that's cool. And that's what I love about variant covers too. The variant cover, discussion can be happening for years and years and years about whether there's too many or whatever. But I know I found artists that were on variant covers that I found that I liked, that I ended up following their art afterwards, which is kind of cool. So having these partnership writing things, so you and James write the script together, I think will open up people's eyes to actually finding your work and then going, yeah, Steve's a pretty badass writer as well. I want to write, and I think so, and that's one of those things. I mean, the Super Mario book is like one of the best things I've ever read. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm very in favor of it.
yeah,
Some of my earlier credits were with Steve Orlando before I
yep,
had done as much writing on a solo level. I'm sure that helped, position me to do more on my own. And now that I've done a lot more on my own, so I do a series of Spider-Man comics for Disney in Italy and in the European market. And now that I've done like 30, 40 of those. I'm actually bringing on a co-writer who's a friend of mine, Josh Cornion, who's sort of like a rising creator to help, boost him up and get him
mhm,
more credit. So it's like, paying it forward to kind of
yes,
keep it going. So no, I think that's a great way to kind of spread the love around. And I'd love to carve off more James fans to come over and be Steve Foxe fans, but the main reason we did this was to just launch the line as
yes,
large
yeah,
as possible, of
yeah,
course, and to make sure folks know that the dark horse side of the line is something that we feel strongly
yeah.
about too, not just the Boom and the Image books that we do. So
Is Let This One Be a Devil? Is it a 4 issue series?
it's a 4 issue
Yeah.
series, yes.
Okay, so 4 issues. And do they, I know they haven't announced yet, but there's obviously a plan for the next True Weird Stories, right? I mean, it's already in the
Yes.
motion. Okay,
Yes.
and
So
it's
we
obviously
have
going to be some sort of cryptid, some sort of in that same vein as the Jersey Devil.
Yes. So different creative teams will do each
Mhm.
one. And we have other monsters lined up. So they're each going to be major monsters. Don't be looking for the Fresno night crawlers. Unfortunately, I don't think you could do 100 pages on the Fresno night crawlers, but I'd love to see someone try. But yeah, so we're going to tackle major monsters, and it'll be the same format each time, where it's going to be an original story built around the real mythology.
That's so awesome. Honestly, every time I read these kind of stories, whether it be wild fictions or like this, Let This Be a Devil, I'm a huge X Files fan. So like these are
Oh
like
yeah.
those episodes. Like honestly, in my mind, I'm like picturing the X Files Jersey Devil episode when I was reading this, which is completely different, not
Yeah,
even close to what
it's
this is. But it's like
terrible as a Jersey Devil episode. It's a very empathetic episode, but they should have called it like a Bigfoot episode or a
yes,
Wild Man episode or
yes.
something. I have no idea why they called it a Jersey Devil episode.
But I was like, but it made me want to watch it. I'm like, okay. But the problem with that is it's a slippery slope because I feel like when I say, oh, I made me want to watch it, I'll like watch that episode. I'll be like, ah, screw it. I'll just watch the whole thing over again. And I'll just watch the entire X Files again. And people are like, have you seen this new show? I'm like, no, I'm watching the X Files. They're like, what?
That's a better use of your time, I think.
But I was just like, it's just so funny. When I saw the Jersey Devil, literally reading it in the solicitation was like, oh, I want to watch the X Files episode, even though, like I said, it's not good. but I like that episode. I like that show.
Oh
I
no,
mean,
no,
so
no.
is it.
It's a good episode. It's just not a good Jersey
Jersey
Devil
Devil. That's I
episode.
should. Yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. But it's cool. And I think there's carving this little section out that people have told stories, obviously, about these kind of creatures over the years in comic books and books and things like that. But it is kind of cool right now. That's like to tell these stories and bring your own little pizzazz to it. From Tiny Onion and from you and James and Brad and um, you know. Piotr over there at Dark Horse is really cool. Yeah, the Dark Horse line of Tiny Onion stuff is awesome too. So like, check the Blue Book stuff out too because that's really cool, and so on. And obviously, the Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher K.S. is phenomenal as well at Dark Horse. But true weird stories. Let this one be a devil, which I think that the world nowadays in these long titles, man, I don't know what to tell you.
Look, it's search engine optimization.
Well, I was thinking Matt Rosenberg is coming on. Is actually the next episode after this episode on the podcast to help promote Matt's new book. But I laughed as I'm like, dude, he's just trying to like outdo himself with the longer titles. Like he's trying to win like it should be some
Yes.
sort of like Eisner Award for the world's longest title in the year or something along those like some sort of honorary title for having the longest title in
Well, I'm
comics. But
yeah, so I'm editing Matt now, and
okay.
so when he gave me the list of books that he's working on, it did take me like 3 weeks to memorize which was which because of the length of all the titles.
Well, just like my buddy's like when he's like writing out because he like types out his like LCS owner. He's an owner of a Galactic Comics in Bangor, Maine, and he's typing out the titles and he's like, dude, it's like I don't have space on these. Like I'm trying to find a way to put this like, and I'm like, it's true when you go to review a comic book. And like the SEO says that your title's already too long. I'm like, that's just the name of the comic. I can't even put some sort of descriptor to say what I like about the comic. It's like the name of the comic fills the spot. But no, it's kind of funny. So let this one be a devil. This hits February 19th. At local comic book shops, the first issue, and then obviously it's coming out monthly after that. I wanted to quickly touch on something. You mentioned something about you remembering characters for every 6 weeks. Like it's bad enough as readers, as us as readers, to remember what happened in the comic book issue that happened the month before, let alone the person writing it. So I can understand. I can understand that that dilemma on that, but yeah, because month to month I'm always like, but it gets me to read the other issue
Yeah,
again. It's like,
that's
oh,
what I
read that
have to do
again.
too.
Yes. What happened in the past? Yeah, exactly. So that's really cool. And you have new other books that are out too. You have Time Slide that just came out. Your New Champions that's over at Marvel as well. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting right currently?
Superior Avengers just got
Yes.
announced, which
Yep.
is a One World Under Doom tie-in. It's a brand new team of hand-picked Doom's Avengers that are being led by Christoph, Doom's son. So that book, I don't think we've actually revealed too many details, so I probably shouldn't say more, but it's a brand new set of villainous-looking Avengers
Yeah.
who share names with a lot of familiar villains. So that's launching in April, I believe. And then yeah, New Champions is going on now.
Okay.
So that I think
And obviously, you're still editing. I mean, Department of Truth is still coming out. The Deviant,
yes,
those
Department of
things.
Truth, World Tree, The Deviant,
Yeah.
and then this fall I have Kid Flash Going Rogue, which is a middle grade graphic novel coming out from DC with Jerry Gaylord on art. And I have the first two books in the Archives of the Unexplained series, which is coming out from First Second, which are middle grade spooky nonfiction series. So it's actually kind of like a tonal cousin to True Weird style stories, where we are telling scary true stories.
That's
So
awesome. I love that kind of thing. Honestly, over the past couple of years, some of my favorite books have been middle grade books, and I don't know if it's because it's like, I don't know. I just feel like I don't know if because I don't have to think as much, or something. Like I don't know what it is, but there's like, I mean, honestly, the Blue Beetle story by Julio Anta and Jacoby Salcedo was a middle grade or young adult. I should say it's not probably middle grade, it's probably young adult book, but it was like a Blue Beetle story that I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's very very like I don't know, just easy to read and easy to understand and things like that. I don't know what it was about it, but some of my favorite prose novels of the past couple of years have been, young adult or middle grade novels. Honestly,
yeah,
maybe I just not thinking too much. I think it's what it is. But
and we got amazing art on it. Naomi
yes,
Franquiz and Fran Bueno are doing the
that's
first two
awesome.
books, and they look stunning. And
That's
I should
yeah.
say, Luca Maresca is my collaborator on Superior Avengers. So shout him out.
Yeah, that's
Um,
actually.
yeah, I think that's everything. And then, oh, I should mention too, Beastly Buddies is currently running on the Marvel Unlimited app.
Yeah.
So that's a Werewolf by Night and Man Thing serial, which I'm doing with Armand Bodnar. It is probably one of my favorite things I've ever written. It is just this very silly road trip comedy between the two of them. And if I could, I would write it for 1,000 chapters. So I would love folks to go check that out if they have Marvel Unlimited, so we can get a second season.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Yeah, I love that, and that's it's always a fun thing. It's like you know, the one thing that you love the most is the one that's probably the one that like isn't the one that's the most popular, which is always
Yeah, flying under the
annoying.
radar.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Oh,
yes,
and Alien Paradiso is still
yes.
running. So yes, Alien Paradiso. I think issue 2 just came out.
You're one of those ones. Steve Foxe here is one of those ones that's like I always like talk to my local comic book shop owner Paul Eaton, and I'm always like, hey, you know, Steve is coming on, da da da, and they ask always like, okay, what's some of his credits, and I'm like listing off credits, and I'm like, and it's like the same thing with Matt. I was like, oh my gosh, like this, I just go back and I'm like, holy crap, there's so much stuff. I'm like, where do you guys find the time?
I
You
just
make it
work a
work.
lot.
Yes, you make it work. You make it work for sure, and that's awesome. I'm so excited. So let this one be a devil. Part of the True Weird series over at Dark Horse and Tiny Onion comes out February 19th. At your local comic book shops, and this will drop about a week prior. So just if you still haven't told your LCS that you want it, tell them you want it, put them in your pull box, whatever it is. And I know it's a little harder. I know my LCS is a little harder to get books right now, so just let them know you want it because of the upheaval in the distribution world right now is kind of crazy and people switching and all that stuff. So I know you can get Dark Horse comics from Penguin Random House, so it's a little bit easier in that sense that they've been pretty on time and stuff like that. But just let your LCS shop know you want it so that they can at least hold it, or if they only get a few copies or whatever it may be, that you can actually get the book. That's one thing. I just communicate with them on that sense. And if they don't get it for some weird reason, they can reorder it and things like that. So just communicate with your LCS. Don't walk in there and go, I don't see it, and leave. Like so many people I've seen. I know where a lot of us comic book readers are a lot of introverts, and so they don't want to talk to the shop owner or anything like that. But like, if you really want something, just say something because they might be able to. They may have it out back or whatever. So make sure you talk to your LCS owner on that, or someone who works there, I should say. So yeah, I'm excited. I loved it, so I hope other people do, and I'm excited for more from not just this series, but the continuation of the True Weird stories. And I'm hoping that you do many more comics. Does that work?
That's
I'm
the
excited
plan.
for your work. Let's keep Steve employed, people. Like let's buy Steve's comics. No, I appreciate you coming out and talking to us today on this episode, and we'll get you back in the future when we have a chance. Sound good?
Sounds great to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.